Did you see the Vox videos? Oh yeah, I went to watch this today. There's a video on how Trump's second term will be different.
Donald Trump will become the 47th President of the United States.
I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
So I think we should start off by just saying what's happening, and then my big question is going to be, how should we be thinking about this?
We now know that Donald Trump is returning to the White House. American voters have seen what Trump had to offer, and at least a critical mass of them decided they want to do the same thing again.
I called up some colleagues at Vox to ask what we should be making of this moment, and I ended up spending a long time talking to Zach.
I'm Zach Beecham. I'm a senior correspondent at Vox.
Zach writes about reactionary politics, the right wing, basically. And the thing that he really wanted me to understand is that even though the outcome of this election is the same as the 2016 election, the Trump who is about to become president.
He does look like thin George Lucas. Is it echoing? It's not echoing.
Donald Trump is much more organized. He knows what he's doing, has a series of distinct policy objectives that he's reiterated again and again. It will be in a lot of ways fundamentally different than what we all lived through 4 years ago.
All right, let's see it. Let's see it.
Lock up the Bidens. Lock up Hillary. Lock them up.
The first time Trump was president, he wanted to do all sorts of very controversial things, and a lot of times he didn't actually end up doing them. One big example is wanting his critics and political opponents to be prosecuted. He was constrained by other parts of the political system, the guardrails of democracy. I'm Andrew Prokop. I cover politics. The guardrails encompass first Congress and the courts. But also within the executive branch, you have Trump's own appointees for top positions who often last time around proved unwilling to carry out some of the things he wanted to do. Then you also have the permanent civil service career employees that he can't fire at will. Well, first of all, the courts have grown more conservative and more Trump-friendly since he put 3 of his own appointees in the Supreme Court. Congressional Republicans have grown.
He really did bink the timing on dying Supreme Court justices. Insane to get 3. Is anyone about to die in the Supreme Court? Let's check the Supreme Court ages. Yeah, I know there's 2 that will step down, but they're already conservative. But I'm talking about changing the math. Do you remember when Amy Coney Barrett was added to the Supreme Court? This is like when I first started streaming, and that guy on the Reddit dressed up as Amy Coney Barrett to get unbanned or something. Does anyone remember that? He put on the fucking... That was a throwback. Yeah, he did it like flirty. He did like a flirty Amy Coney Barrett. That's crazy. The first thing I think of. All right, who's old? Who's old? Age 69. Nice. 76, 74, 70, 64, 57, 59, 52, 54. All right, so Alito and Thomas that are going to step down, right? Likely. Trump, Obama, Bush, Biden. Bro, that's crazy that he started like around when I was born. Lifetime appointments is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous for a judge. It's crazy. That's too long.
Trump and the people around him want hardcore MAGA true believers staffing the government who will not have these pesky qualms about legality or ethics or things like that. And regarding the civil service, Trump wants to use an executive order to reclassify thousands of people with civil service protections against firing as political appointees who he can fire, to then put in a lot of MAGA loyalists in their place instead. He's had 4 years to basically stew over, what he didn't get to do last time and what he would do differently if he was given another chance. And now he will seemingly get that chance.
We're going to have the largest deportation in the history of our country.
The mantra that Trump had on the border on 2016 was build the wall. That was his centerpiece of his immigration platform. That sort of changed over the course of his presidency, and increasingly he wanted to turn his attention not to the border, but to the interior of the US, the undocumented population here. I'm Nicole Norea, and I cover politics and immigration for Vox. Under Biden, there were record levels of people arriving on the border. We've seen those numbers come down significantly in 2024, but when Americans are polled, large portions of them say that they want mass deportations. They might be thinking about people being deported immediately after they arrive on the border.
As his first major
but that's
thing,
not
if I
what
assume.
Trump's contemplating. He's trying to go into communities across the US, and we're talking about people who have lived here, for years and decades. That would sort of involve huge investments in law enforcement and also the cooperation of local law enforcement agencies, which I'm not sure we would see necessarily in Democratic states, but let's say in states like Texas and Florida, certainly you might find law enforcement willing to cooperate with federal immigration authorities there.
I think that is going to be something he's going to attempt to do. We'll see how it plays out. I think it's going to be so stupid. I'm trying to talk about things not just on the moral level because it doesn't convince anyone, but I truly think that it's going to be so incredibly expensive and economically bad. I think it's going to be such a disaster, but it's going to be the first thing he does. So I think it's a first 100 days type thing. And so we'll see. We'll see.
This wasn't as much of a first 100 days thing as Big A thought, but ICE and illegal immigration is a big issue right now. People are protesting the unconstitutional ways ICE agents are picking up suspected illegal immigrants and detaining them. On top of this, the One Big Beautiful Bill was just passed, which allocates another $180 billion to ICE to continue what they are doing. But luckily, we can spend as much money as we want because no one wants to deal with the debt issue.
A landmark decision in American history as it relates to presidential power.
When Trump initially took office, the median vote on the Supreme Court was a moderate conservative, someone who would draw the line somewhere. Then Trump appointed a third of the United States Supreme Court. I'm Ian Millhiser. I cover the Supreme Court at Vox. Trump v. United States is the decision that came down last July concerning Special Prosecutor Jack Smith's indictment of Trump for trying to steal the 2020 presidential election. Trump made this really outlandish argument that he could not be charged with the crime for any official acts he committed while president. Pretty much everyone thought that that argument was silly and ridiculous, and there was no chance that the court would ever adopt it. And then all 6 of the Republican justices adopted it. What that decision said, it said that Donald Trump is immune from criminal prosecution for crimes that he commits using the official powers of office. Trump is allowed to give any order he wants to the Department of Justice. The basic matter is just that anything he does can potentially be beyond the scope of the criminal justice process.
More than 40,000 Palestinians killed since the October 7th Hamas massacre.
Right now, the situation on the ground in Gaza is an extraordinary humanitarian crisis and a moral stain on the United States for enabling so much of this to happen. But it can always get worse. Trump has a blank check approach to Israel. He and his advisors don't believe in any of the even feeble restraints that the Biden administration had put on Israeli conduct. There are factions inside the Israeli government that have different visions of how to conduct the war. The extreme right on Netanyahu's flank, people like Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, believe that Trump will let them do what they want based on what he said, what his advisors say, and what his political coalition at home wants.
Are you on board with the way the IDF is taking the fight in Gaza?
You've got to finish the problem.
These people have a maximalist vision of what they want the war to be. Actually seizing and taking Gaza for Israel and returning to settlement, right, to rebuilding Israeli outposts, moving Israeli Jewish citizens in to make sure that its control over the area never slips. That would mean not just temporary eviction of Gazans from their homes and their cities, which would be bad enough. It would mean creating a massive permanent refugee population. Outside of Gaza, in the West Bank, we can only imagine. Previous American position has been you shall not under any circumstances annex parts of the West Bank. It would be Israel declaring, in essence, its willingness to rule over the Palestinians in perpetuity. What I do know for sure is that a Trump administration would do nothing to punish them for it.
Trump declared he would veto a national abortion ban if he's reelected.
Trump winning the presidency is not good for abortion rights. I mean, he's been out there claiming that he's the father of IVF, that he's going to be great for women's rights. but he surrounds himself with lots of people who absolutely, do not have that as their goal. I'm Rachel Cohen. I cover social policy at Vox, and I've been really focused on abortion rights for the last 2.5 years since Roe was overturned. Something that has been confusing for voters is that I don't think we're going to see a federal ban coming out of Congress. The biggest way that Trump could, I think, use his executive power to restrict abortion rights is to push for the enforcement of the Comstock Act on the federal level. The Comstock Act was this law passed in 1873, and among other things, it banned mailing anything associated with abortion. When the Supreme Court legalized abortion nationwide, the Comstock Act was rendered moot. It didn't matter anymore, but Congress never actually repealed it. Now that Roe has been overturned, you have a bunch of conservatives, including J.D. Vance, who are saying now is the time actually to enforce this zombie law that's been on the books for decades that people forgot about, and we should ban anything associated with abortion from being sent in the mail. So that could include not only abortion pills.
I will say a bunch of states had protecting abortion rights on their ballot as a separate line item, as a separate prop, and I think all of them won. Even the states that voted for Trump. Oh, Florida lost. Florida's tough, bro. Florida's tough. I know Arizona was the one I checked on. Florida had 50%, but they made a law that is in 60 that passed by 54. Wait, really? Can I confirm this? U.S. abortion rights supporters see victories despite major loss in Florida. Oh yeah, you're right. The Florida measure needed 60% of the vote and they got 57. Dude, Florida sucks, bro. Florida government's cooked. That's so troll. Bro, we can't get 60% of Americans to agree on literally anything. Not literally anything, we can't get 60%. That's crazy. If you get 57% of people to agree on anything in America, you have a clear right of God majority. That's crazy. To say you need 60 is like to say it's not possible. That's wild. This 60% rule passed with election 60? Wait, how much did the 60% rule get? How much 60% rule Florida? The amendment ironically passed with 57% of the vote. That's crazy.
But it could also mean any medical equipment associated with, surgical abortion, like dilators or speculums. That would effectively mean a nationwide ban on abortion.
Some might say it's economic nationalism. I call it common sense.
The thing about tariffs is that the president has a lot of unilateral authority to impose them without Congress's will. I'm Eric Levitz, and I write about politics and policy. A tariff is basically a tax on an imported good. Usually the producer passes on the cost of that tax to consumers by charging higher prices to compensate for the tax. Trump's signature proposal on tariffs in the 2024 campaign was a 10% tariff on all foreign imports, regardless of what country they come from and regardless of what kind of good it is, which includes things that the United States cannot possibly produce. There's no tax that you can put on foreign coffee beans that will make it possible to grow them in New England. The general consensus from economists is that this is going to significantly increase prices for Americans, as well as actually potentially undermining American manufacturing. I think that in general, voters tend to be sympathetic to any protectionist trade policy, but I think that in practice, as we've seen in the Biden years, voters are very sensitive to increases in consumer prices. On the other hand, though, this is something that Trump really genuinely seems to believe and hold as a core economic principle, really since the late 1980s.
We let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade.
Put a 25% tax on products that come into the United States.
Old clip.
So that means that Trump plausibly could enact this tariff even if a majority of Republicans in Congress do not want him to.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about tariffs is the effects are felt immediately. So, I've got some hopes that if something like this is tried, we'll see the impacts quite quickly and people will let their voices be heard. Yeah, I mean, it would affect literally as early as midterm. If you actually did a 20% tariff on everything, I think he's going to try and use tariffs in a leverage type way. But, tariffing allies is just generally stupid. It's just generally, you lose all goodwill as allies. They're going to fight you on everything and then they start tariffing your shit back. It's a lot harder to remove tariffs once they're are in place. No, it's not. Not really. It's no harder than it was to create them. It's executive order. You can get rid of it. The hard part is if you do a specific tariff that funds something. Just think about like a tax. Like, sometimes they have 1 cent tax on gasoline that funds the roads or whatever. Once you cut that, then they can't afford. They already tariff our shit amount. Do you have an example? Because I've heard this and they don't. This is not true. Like, for example, I saw someone really vociferously defending this tariff plan as Japan. They were like, Japan tariffs all our cars so we can't compete. And then I looked into it and I was like, wow, is that true? And it's not. Japan doesn't tariff our cars at all. Our cars just don't sell there. They literally just don't buy. They don't want to buy Fords. And like, there was an argument that like, once Trump uses tariffs as like a negotiating tactic, Japan will get rid of its tariffs and then we can start selling our shit there. And it's like, we can already sell our shit there. They just don't want to buy it. So I gotta be honest with you, I don't think you know what you're talking about. I'll just be honest with you, bro. I think you've been cooked by some propaganda.
I think Trump intended to use tariffs as a negotiating tactic, but other countries haven't taken him seriously due to his history of chickening out when the stock market reacts negatively. The White House also recently missed its deadline to finalize 90 trade deals in 90 days, managing only 2, which raises questions about the strategy's effectiveness.
In any democratic system of government, you need nonpartisan civil servants whose job it is to follow and implement the law. A lot of that stuff is technical, from National Parks Administration to the way the Defense Department is run, to the way that we protect and store our nuclear weapons. Trump doesn't like this. Neutral rules of governance obstruct his ability to govern like a kind of machine politician who uses government as a tool of rewarding his friends and punishing his enemies.
You know what's funny is one car brand that's foreign does sell well in Japan. Japan has a great car industry, right? So it just makes sense they wouldn't buy foreign cars in general. Japan designs cars for Japanese people they just know the consumer better. But it's Jeep. Jeep sells great in Japan because they like the American aesthetic of Jeep. They think it looks differentiated and cool in a way, but they would never buy a fucking Ford because it's just worse than Toyota. There's no advantage to it. And no amount of tariff war is going to change that. I mean, the solution to a domestic industry not selling well abroad is rarely tariffs. It's usually to improve the quality of what you have. But in some cases, you're so far behind and the industry is so important that a tariff might be good to protect that specific industry. That is why electric vehicle tariffs on China may have a place, or battery tariffs, because if you lose your entire battery industry, that could be so bad in a future where that's important, or you're ever in a war, or what I was saying. That's why those tariffs have an argument. But tariffs on everything, it's been tried. I mean, look up like Smoot-Hawley, look up like Grover Cleveland's tariff, look up tariffs in the past and how they turned out, and it was negative. So I'm not trying to be partisan here. I'm just looking at the facts.
Big A is talking about the Smoot-Hawley tariff passed in 1930. The goal was to help U.S. industries out of the Great Depression, but instead, it made it worse. Other countries retaliated with their own tariffs, which led to a sharp drop in U.S. exports.
That's why he hates what he calls the deep state.
Demolish the deep state. Obliterate the deep state. Dismantle the deep state.
We could be in a world where very swiftly, because there are no legislative guardrails against this. What if the IRS is now a fully political agency and audits are coming in along political lines? Businesses or media organizations that are critical of Trump start being harassed using the tax code as a means of punishing them. Think about everything that you rely on government to do. And now imagine those tasks being bent towards political ends. Donald Trump is going to be the next president of the United States again. And this time around, we'll make the first time look like child's play.
No tax on bits. Streamers are the lifeblood of our economy. Primes, bits, subs. We need to remove the tax on these so they can become job creators. This is what I've been saying. Someone finally saying the quiet part out loud. The reason our economy was bad over the past 4 years is because Biden was strangling streamers with the tax code. I have to pay taxes on these subs? What are we talking about? No tax on primes. That is a fucking promise. Big A. All abortion props together in one place. Oh, what's this? Oh, cool. How did they do? Let's find out. It passed in Arizona. That's the one I saw. It passed in Colorado. It passed in Maryland. It failed in Florida with 57% of the vote. I think that is really funny. Florida, that is just cooked. That is a cooked thing to do. If you're Floridian, why would you, think about this? Think about why there's this artificial 60% barrier for a popular vote on a prop. That's crazy. Understand that this is the people, 57%, this is the people that voted for Trump. And a large portion of them voted for Trump and a right to abortion. And then they didn't get it. That's crazy. That's a bad system. Missouri, thank you for the yes. Wow, only 51? Yikes. Yikes, Missouri. Learn a thing or two from Florida, okay? This is nuts. You can't pass it just because the majority of people want it. Let's get those numbers up. Yes in Maryland, yes in Montana, yes in Nebraska. Yeah, I mean, this is just broadly popular. What is this? Oh, no in Nebraska? Oh, interesting. What is this amendment? No, it lost. It lost in Nebraska 48-52 and then prohibited after. People vote so strangely. What about ranked choice voting? Was that repealed? It got repealed? Ranked choice voting lasted 4 years? Interesting. Was it too confusing for people? Wording matters. Oh yeah. I mean, I honestly was thinking about this when I was voting. When there's like 50 props and all this stuff, we got to rethink how it's done. I honestly think this is going to sound crazy. I think each side should get a TikTok. And I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Each side, you should have to put on headphones and watch a TikTok of each side and then make your vote. And I think we would have a more informed, I'm not kidding about this, because I was sitting there and I spend a vast majority of my day reading. This is my job, right? I can spend all day sitting on the fucking couch reading the FT or whatever. That's not what everyone has time to do. And I got into that booth and there was confusing. There was some that were fucking confusing. They have like one fucking poorly written paragraph. And I have to understand, first of all, what the implications of this is, what it costs, who supports it. It was like not effective. And also, as you're going through a bazillion of these and there's people in line behind you, you're like, I just fucking want to click. You don't want to sit there and figure it out. So I honestly think if I had my headphones on and I could watch a short summary, it would improve the average person's understanding of what they're voting for tenfold, 100-fold.